Hey guys, it's Angelo, and yesterday night, Blizzard brought a new patch to the Shadowlands beta, with more very interesting changes to the Shadow Priest, as well as to legendary items in general. As we're getting closer and closer to the launch of the pre-patch, and accordingly to the release of Shadowlands, the spec changes are much more fine-tuned at this point, and are beginning to focus on very specific aspects, in this case giving a slight nerf to Shadow Word Death, changing 2 of our Shadow Priest legendaries almost completely, and considerably nerfing a Disc Priest legendary in the process as well, among other things. There's also news on the currently underperforming covenant of the Necrolords and their Unholy Nova. As always, if you want to join the discussion with anything Priest or World of Warcraft related, then be sure to check the link in the description box below in order to join our Discord. Also, we're very close to 20,000 subscribers. Thank you so much for your support, and if you haven't subscribed already, I promise that it'll be worth your time. Alright, now, without any further ado, let's go right ahead and have a look. Alright, starting us off will be the changes to Shadow Word Death. As always, I will first read out the actual changes to you before giving you my insight and going into detail. So, Shadow Word Death spell power scaling damage has been reduced from 133% to 125%, and its execute buff from 175% more damage when the target is below 20% health has now been reduced to 150% damage. The same change has been applied to the Discipline Priest as well, while the Priest's specific damage modifier on the spell has also been reduced, which is essentially just mirroring the above mentioned numbers. For the Discipline Priest, it's important that the added fact that the base mana cost of Shadow Word Death has also been slightly bumped up from 1.2% base mana to 1.6%. While this doesn't sound like much initially, when stretched over the course of an encounter or even a trash pack, this is honestly no small amount of extra mana you'll be spending. Every third Shadow Word Death will now cost an extra 1.2% base mana in comparison to previously, which is honestly quite a lot. Now personally, I don't mind this change too much, at least for the Discipline Priest, given the fact that Shadow Word Death was especially strong with a legendary, Kiss of Death, which we will go into in just a bit, and so of course it needs to be brought in line in order to not be too strong in comparison to everything else. Now the spell itself actually does deal a lot of damage, so these changes should bring it in line for this spec in general. For Shadow Priests, I personally didn't see an issue with Shadow Word Death before this nerf, but this won't hurt our rotation or our damage significantly really, so it's honestly pretty acceptable. How much damage will now truly be missing from Shadow Word Death for both specs in the long run, honestly that remains to be seen once we get a real comparison with the previous iteration of it, so we're gonna have to test it just a little bit more, but for now, these changes are honestly pretty fine. Now, let's move on and get to the rather unexpected changes, and those are the changes to the legendary effects. Okay, so 2 legendary effects have been changed significantly, while a third one has only been nerfed. For the Shadow Priest, Eternal Call to the Void has been changed to not only proc from your Mind Flay, but now also from your Mind Seer, giving both spells a chance to spawn a Void Tendril that channels damage at the target for 15 seconds, and generating 3 insanity each time it deals said damage. This is a great change, and was honestly much needed because especially in AoE situations we will hardly ever use Mind Flay, rendering the legendary in that case almost useless in AoE situations. With this change, the legendary also takes some effect in these previously problematic scenarios, which would certainly see the legendary rising to prominence further. It's currently already one of the legendaries which are pretty good for us as Shadow Priests, and this change only solidifies this. The second change comes in form of Shadow Flame Prism. Shadow Flame Prism has essentially been completely reworked. Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death now cause your Mindbender or Shadow Fiend to teleport behind your target, slashing up to 5 nearby enemies for Shadow Flame damage. Each time a rift is triggered, the duration of Shadow Fiend or Mindbender is increased by 1.5 per second. These rifts are triggered whenever the Shadow Fiend or Mindbender actually jumps, which effectively increases its duration for each cast of Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death by 1.5 seconds. This is a very interesting change to the effect because it encompasses longer Shadow Fiend or Mindbender uptime while not just reducing its cooldown by a flat percentage, which is honestly kind of boring. This adds a lot of more interaction to the Mindbender and even honestly promotes you to slightly change up your rotation during its uptime, weaving in Shadow Word Death and hoping for Mind Blast procs along the way with Dark Thoughts, which feels like a lot of fun when you actually play it. Be sure to let me know what you think about these changes in the comments down below. Personally, in all honesty, I really like this. Our final change to the Legendaries are sad news, unfortunately, for the Discipline Priest, and come in the form of Kiss of Death. Kiss of Death now only triggers Atonement when using Shadow Word Death on targets below 20% health, further bringing Shadow Word Death in line to be an execute only. This will hit hard for Discipline Priests at the moment, because Kiss of Death was most certainly our strongest legendary effect. With this nerf, it will most likely lose dominance in raids while still being strong in Mythic Plus, but most likely not the best option any longer. I'm kinda sad about this change, but hey, I called it in my last video, the Discipline Priest is incredibly strong at the moment, and it's clear that the spec needs some balancing, even though being the best healer is of course a lot of fun. Now, there are some other major changes for the Discipline Priest, like a 2-second duration reduction to Rapture, as well as the Spirit Shell, but these bring in line previous aspects of the spec, specifically for Rapture, bringing it back to its previous power level before its last change. It's of course still a nerf, don't get me wrong, but if you want to check out those changes, I'll leave them in the description box below. They're big, but less impactful to the overall gameplay of the spec. The change to Shadow Word Death and to Kiss of Death specifically actually also take away some strength of the Kyrian Covenant for the Disc Priest, as Boon of the Ascended loses strength in its ramp up with Evangelism, so of course this change is huge. Now, our final update comes to Unholy Nova. There had been data mines of Unholy Nova receiving a rework, essentially removing its 15-yard range and replacing it on an enemy, or rather placing it on an enemy rather than on you. Now this change, however, is not going to go live on the beta yet, and Blizzard had the following to say. A test spell for Unholy Nova showed up in some data mining. We wanted to clarify that currently, Unholy Nova is not being changed. We've heard feedback that being forced into melee range to use the spell is restrictive, particularly when using abilities like Shadow Crash, which have a minimum range. This is something we're looking to address. However, this prototype version that was data mined is still in development and not something we are looking for feedback on at this time. So, this means that Blizzard is very aware of the problems with Unholy Nova's range and are trying to figure out a plausible solution, which I find very good. How the solution will look at the end of the day, well, that remains to be seen, but the statement, as well as the data mined prototype, makes me feel positive about it, to be quite honest. How the ultimately implemented change will play out, again, remains to be seen, but I'll be sure to keep you updated. So what do you think about all of these changes? Do you feel positive about them? The Shadow Priest changes look nice in all honesty, and even the Shadow Word Death change for Shadow seems pretty okay. For Discipline Priests, I do feel a little bit sorry, because those nerfs are, well, all things considered, quite impactful, specifically the Kiss of Death nerf, as it trickles down into other aspects of the Discipline Priest's gameplay, such as the use of Shadow Word Death and the use of Boon of the Ascended. Be sure to let me know what you think in the comments down below. It'll be interesting to see what other changes Blizzard is going to dish out before launch, because I'm honestly still expecting a few changes, especially so to some Covenant abilities, just like Unholy Nova, but also to some more Legendaries, especially those of the Shadow Priest, because most just feel incredibly lackluster at the moment, which I've mentioned in my final look at the Shadow Priest's problems. There isn't too much time left, so just like these changes, the upcoming changes need to be very concise. All in all, I think that Shadowlands is forming more and more into a good expansion and will certainly be a big leap in comparison to Battle for Azeroth in form of an upgrade. As always, thank you so much for watching, and if this video was helpful to you, be sure to leave a like, and if you wish to stay updated on the content of this channel, again, feel free to subscribe. A special thanks to my supporters over on Patreon, you guys help out a lot, and thank you everyone for your support. Now, as always, have a good one my friends, get very excited for Shadowlands, and I will see you all in the next one.